Get ready to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I'm your host, Solaris BlueRaven. My wonderful guest tonight is Preston Dennett. And Preston, it's wonderful to have you on board tonight. I'm very, very excited to interview you. And for everybody who's interested in your books, what's the best way to purchase them? On your website or through Amazon?
Thanks, Solaris. Well, either is fine. Yeah, my books are on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, other stores. My website is my name. If you just Google me, it should take you right there.
Perfect. And you also have a blog. You have all sorts of cool stuff on your website. It's you can spend hours in there. So it's really nice. So, yeah, it seems like you do a lot of writing. How long does it take you to finish your books or start them?
I was looking at that just to analyze it myself. And since 1996, I've put about one book out per year.
Wow, that's fascinating. That's excellent. You crank. Yeah. I was going to say, you have a lot of books out there. That's a nice library you have. Very informative. I encourage people to research. You've done a lot of good work. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Hey, my pleasure.
Is this more of a hobby? But it isn't really. It's your reality. I mean, it is the reality. So is that how you see it?
I work full time. This is not something I can make a living at least not yet, certainly. Right. And I don't do it for money. That obviously not for money or fame. I feel compelled to look into this. Yeah, I don't know if I'd call it a hobby, but almost more like a mission. Mm-hmm. Honest to God, I feel, because I've seen UFOs a number of times, and I feel like they're aware. And God, I know how that sounds, but I feel like they're almost aware of it to some extent. Like every couple of years, they'll have a sighting, like keep writing, type of thing.
Yeah. Do you have an interaction when a lot of people say when they see a UFO that they feel like the presence, there's some kind of a telepathic communication or something connected in consciousness that they acknowledge you and you acknowledge them? Do you get that when you've seen them or no?
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. I absolutely have. And I've had, a dozen sightings maybe of various types, some very ambiguous, others like, wow. Probably, and the second one was the first was very ambiguous, a light, like a star, like a shooting star, but somebody called it down. It was pretty crazy. Mm-hmm. But the second, oh my God, I'm like driving along and this ball of light comes right up to my car. I'm telling you, a ball of light, like the size of a golf ball, right in front of my windshield, goes back and forth, dips down, goes straight up, and it's gone. So this thing is, that's interaction for sure.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't really get anything mentally from it, but I felt like this thing targeted me. Mm-hmm. But the time I did, I had a huge one. I was interviewing this lady. I'll call her Wendy. She was having these major experiences. She's since become a good friend, but was having these experiences with the ETs, full on, the entire gamut of them, from sightings to abductions, hybrid babies, and I'm transcribing her interview, right? Up in my condo, and I'm transcribing about how she reached out and kicked one of these things, broke its neck. And they got really surprised that she had this much control and took the injured gray away. I'm thinking, do I believe this? Do I really believe this? I know she's telling the truth, but this is crazy. Mm-hmm. And I got this impulse. And it was very strong. I couldn't resist it. It's like, go to the roof of your condo right now. Go. And I'm like, okay. At some point I'm like, oh. And what's weird, Solaris, is, this is nothing I've ever done before or since. I don't live there now, but it certainly never happened. And I got my glasses. I'm a little bit nearsighted. I use them to drive. Ran up onto the roof of my condo, and I was there 20 seconds when this light appears, maybe 30 seconds, maybe 10. This light appears 50 feet away, 100 feet away. It's bright orange. It's a sphere. And it says, and it talks to me in a very kind of subtle way. It says, it's us. You didn't believe us, it's us. We're Wendy's aliens. Here we are.
Wow.
And that was, the first blast. They blasted me with that. And I'm like, holy cow. And then they're like, yep, it's us. Look what we can do. Watch this. And they start darting around.
Wow.
Back and forth, going back and forth. And like, see, we're real. And I'm like, yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. Thanks. Wow.
That's amazing.
And that was the first time. She took me out and later showed me one of these raft, I'll call it, face to face, 50 feet away again, but much more intense.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. But yeah, that time they spoke to me and I heard it.
Was it like a telepathic communication?
Yeah, very much so. And it was,
wow,
almost words. I'd like to say it was words. It wasn't because I didn't hear a voice.
Mm-hmm. But you interpolated it.
But yeah, I mean, the message was clear, as crystal clear.
Wow, that's interesting. And then you mentioned also that they were able to call down a UFO. Is that what that was? So you mentioned that, not this particular person, but you've seen people do that, actually summon one, or no?
Yeah, I mean, she did it.
That's amazing.
And the first UFO I ever saw, Andy Rice, R-E-I-S, I believe was his last name, talked about his experiences down in Santa Monica and says, I'm going to call down a UFO after the meeting. And I'm like, oh, okay. This is like one of the first meetings I've ever been to. And I'm like, all right. And we all meditated. I'm like, great. I didn't come here to meditate, but whatever.
Oh, you're funny.
And and this is downtown Santa Monica, Solaris. We're in the park. There's cars driving by us. You can't see a star in the sky. I mean, there's so much light pollution.
Right.
And he's like, okay, we're done. They're coming. Here they are. Look right there. And he says, keep looking. Keep looking. And boom, this shooting star appears.
Wow.
And I'm like, wow.
Else.
Yeah. I'm like, okay. Looked like a shooting star. It was kind of bright for one. Never seen one down here, It was really bright and very, it was impressive. But just ambiguous enough that if you couldn't accept it, there was a way out.
Wow. That's fascinating. Have you ever had any missing time associated with those visions, or when you see a UFO? Anybody have any missing time at that circle or that group?
No, I don't think so.
I was just curious to see if anything happens through their consciousness, when they were observing that coming in, maybe it does something. I was curious.
I kind of look back at all these incidences and I sometimes wonder, because I remember seeing that, ball of light that I told you right in front of my windshield. And I didn't talk about it. I kind of forgot about it. I didn't talk about it for a couple of years. And I can't say that I really remember going home and thinking, I just saw that. Even, you know what I mean? I don't really remember what happened after that. So
that's interesting.
I'm like, hey, well,
Yeah, maybe another book. Because I'm wondering about the missing time correlation with that and then observing these things. You're calling them down, so there's an interaction to some degree. Or they are.
Well, I joined the CSETI group with Stephen Greer here in L.A. when it formed. And, first night we called down a UFO. There was one there, honest to God.
Wow. What kind was it?
It was this blob of light. And it was at the zenith. It was, 40,000 feet. It was way up there, but it wasn't a satellite. I can tell you that, or a helicopter or anything like that. I was taking a lot of astronomy courses. I know basically what it wasn't. And we went up the next night, much fewer of us, and had another experience with strobe-like lights. And
the strobe, was it white?
Yeah.
I was curious because I saw something this years back, but I thought it was a drone. But it was very unusual. It was like a strobe. It just came in out of nowhere, and then it looked like a strobe pulsating, and then it left. But it didn't. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was a drone. That's my logical side. But what did you see? Can you describe it?
Yeah, we were all meditating, trying to call this stuff down through, meditation and visualizations and so on, and thought someone was flashing their flashlight around in the campground. Is what I thought. Because I could see it through my eyelids, and after about the third one, I opened my eyes, and so had everyone else, and there was these flashes of light. And about that time, they left, and we couldn't figure out where they were coming from. It was really strange.
Oh yeah.
And so we had that sort of thing happen quite a bit, and I've had pretty regular experiences since then, but they've always been kind of at an arm's length. Nothing super. I've interviewed people who are, had absolutely lifelong experiences, very close up, take it on board, the whole deal. I haven't had that.
Right. I'm always wondering what's your take on Stephen Greer, because to me it seems like he's connected. He's so tied into the Black Space program that he's able to actually get these things to show up because he has a connection. Does that make sense at all, or do you think it's something opposite?
I don't know what's going on with him. I've certainly had my interactions with him.
Mm-hmm.
His cases on, first he said, in how to contact UFOs.
Mm-hmm.
The first two, I've called it CE5, were my cases, by the way.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, he referenced, cases that I had researched and presented involving, calling down UFOs with lights, which did happen. These are two amazing cases, one in Santa Monica and one in San Diego. And I enjoyed his whole SETI movement. I thought it was great. And he moved into this different field of, I've argued with him about abductions, for example. And because I wanted to write the foreword to my book, UFO Healings. And he didn't want to do it because I was used the word abduction more than once. And he's like, well, no, abductions are, black ops. They're all black ops. And I'm like, well, all of them? Really all? And so we started going through the cases, and we started having a little bit of a disagreement there because he's pretty much set on that. Last time I spoke with him, which was quite some time ago, that the abduction phenomenon is not real. And I can tell you from my own research, it is. And I've done the research. I've read the books, all of them, and I'm not sure he has. I don't know how many people he's interviewed in terms of people who've had experiences.
Very interesting.
I know he's had experiences. He's certainly written about his own. But for him to say, I've had an experience and all you other people know, I'm like, well, no, that's disingenuous. I'm not happy about that. I love this guy. Don't get me wrong. I love him. I love what he's doing. And I love that he's been very influential and bring forth like the secret technology and exposing these secrets, his book Disclosure and his whole Disclosure project. I love it. It's doing really well. But I'm sticking to my story here that, there are grays. There are gray aliens. There really are.
So he's saying that there's no gray aliens. Is he trying to say that there are no extraterrestrials?
I'm not entirely clear on his theory.
Hey, I was just curious. Okay.
But take the Brooklyn Bridge abductions as investigated by Bud Hopkins. He said, no, this is a good example. This is a government project. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I'm really agree with that. My problem with that is that I've talked to enough people who've had, abduction experiences or experiences with Nordic type, I'll call them, or human looking, or praying mantis, that I know that this is not caused by human military. And he gave me the impression that he felt, by and large, almost all of it was.
Well, if that's the case, then what he's creating with the CE5, then whatever he's summoning is obviously black fleet, black science, ours, basically. Is that what, that's what it's alluding to. If he's not acknowledging what you're talking about, then that means that everything that he's trying to create through all these meditations is ours. It's our craft in the Black Space Fleet.
I'm not sure he looks at it like that. And
well, you should bring it to his attention because that to me is contradictory. So who's occupying? You should ask him that next time you guys draw down a ship. Say, hey, whose is this? Is this ours or this off-world? Who's occupying it? And see what he says. Just curious.
I haven't seen him in years. He always calls me Dennis when I see
really?
him.
Oh, that's funny.
He's a nice enough guy. I hate to badmouth anyone, and I'm certainly not.
No, you're not.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, we're just having a discussion.
But I have a disagreement. I'm just going to say it. This is not what I believe, and this is my understanding of what he believes, and I may be wrong about that. I want to give that a caveat because that was some time ago.
Well, I can tell you, and you probably know this, that we are, obviously, there's all kinds of species out there. And in my opinion, I think they have reverse engineered. I was talking about this earlier in an interview. I think they've reverse engineered certain species here with our Black Science Department, which is very, very advanced. So who knows really what they're capable of. But I think that until we actually lift that veil once again and show everybody what's going on in the Black Science Department, we're never really going to get any true answers. But he certainly seems to be alluding to the fact that everything that is being presented to the mass collective that looks like an extraterrestrial is done through our government and our Black Science Department. Now, if I ever interview him, and I'd love to, I will ask him, but very, very interesting. And you've gotten, like I said, look at all the work you've done with contactees and experiences of your own. So that's something also.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because there's a number of forces at work and at Earth here.
Right.
We do have this black government, and they have an agenda, and I'm not sure it's in my personal best interests or the average person, really.
It's not. In my opinion, just from where I've been with this technology, because I was interfaced with covert technology, and I can tell you, it's really designed to divert your consciousness. It's not designed to, allow you to keep ascending off world. It really wants you contained here. In my opinion, I think that's their whole idea, is to control the collective and the belief systems.
Right.
So,
I mean, we'll look at these drug commercials with a list of symptoms, which, I mean, is enough to scare anyone off.
Oh, yeah. And then once again, you can heal your own body, as you were touching on earlier. We don't even need those things, technically.
Yeah, so there's definitely that whole factor there, and they're a real problem. I mean, let's face it, they do have a certain amount of control over what's happening to us. But there's so many other forces right now. I mean, the ETs are a real strong force. And what I find interesting, and this is just kind of my take on it, is it's unprecedented. Yes, we've had ET contact for thousands of years, and probably genetic manipulation and a lot of guidance and all kinds of contact and waves of sightings, but nothing like what happened in 1947 onward. Since then, it's been nonstop. It's escalating, and they're like, you know what? This time, we're not going away. And we're going to keep. I mean, if you look at the files of NUFORC, the National UFO Reporting Center, and MUFON, it's daily. It's constant. There's a constant influx of sightings. Right now, someone is seeing a UFO. Right now, someone's being taken on board. I mean, this is happening. So it's just a matter of, changing people's consciousness and making them aware of it and getting to the point where there can be open official contact without a huge upset to our society.
Right. Well, I think people are calibrated to the UFO experience just because of Hollywood and how they've been portraying it. But at the same time, they also portray extraterrestrials as kind of negative, and that's also the fear mongering, in my opinion. So, but yeah, there's so much activity here. You can't hide it anymore. And even with the Black Space Program or the Black Science Department with the advanced technologies, we know so much about what they're capable of that it's just like there's no more boogeyman. So I don't know why they're even bothering with keeping everything really hidden and secretive when in fact, a lot of us who've actually been out there exposing this stuff, it's kind of like the game's over already. So maybe they'll catch up with the whole program and just kind of let it go and just open up the door and say, hey,
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's the problem of the disparity between the power and wealth. You can kind of disperse the knowledge. I mean, the people on, this black side or whether they're good intentioned or not, have the money and power and the knowledge. We don't have the money and power, but we have the knowledge.
Correct. Yeah.
So there's a evening out there, right, which is leading towards what I think is going to be an evening out of everything else.
I agree. Well, I also think that a lot of who we are as multidimensional beings in our states of consciousness surpasses their exotic technology, because everything that they've created, we can do with our minds and consciousness. Even from astral projection to phase shifting to bilocation to all these things that we're capable of doing if we change our vibration, right? And we can probably take our bodies with us. So in my opinion, I think that they don't understand. I think they've done a disservice to mankind, because had they educated everybody, we would all be very advanced as a race. I mean, a complete global race. So it's kind of a shame that they've done that to try to bottleneck information and create their own version of things.
Yeah, which is why the ETs have done did go to officials. They did go to our leaders, which is such a cliche, take me to your leader. But they did. They went there and tried to, disperse spiritual knowledge and kind of discourage the nuclear testing. This happened at Edwards Air Force Base to Eisenhower and presumably in other places. And no, we were interested in their technology and their weapons, and that's what we wanted. So they've gone to grassroots, they're contacting people, and it's their number one message, protect your environment, wake up spiritually. You can do hands-on healing. You can do channeling. You can do out-of-body exploring, and that is by alternative energy. These are their messages over and over again. When ETs talk to people, this is what they're saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's usually about that, isn't it? It's never a negative. That part is very clear. The only negative stuff comes from the military abductions, which are literally done by the Black Ops guys. So yeah, that's very interesting. How there's a polarity there.
Yeah,
sure.
my labs are real. It's not all my labs, and when we know this because if you talk to people like Melinda Leslie or Lycia Davidson or Leah Haley, and there's a host of people who've had ET experiences, and then they have a government abduction.
Right. Yeah.
And
they want to extract data. That's they usually track. Excuse me. They usually track the contactee and then pull them into those my labs for extraction.
Exactly.
Information. Yeah.
Which is and if that's one and the same thing, well then shouldn't the government know all this stuff already?
Right. Well, that's the thing is I think they have an awful lot of data, but had it not been for the contactee types, I don't think they would have any data because they've been doing experimentation behind the scenes. There's only so much they can acquire, but they are data mining, and that's the whole idea. You talk about national security and all this other stuff. I mean, for decades they've been data mining everybody and everything, so right down to the DNA at this point. That's another scenario altogether. But
I mean, I feel like there's this real strong last hurrah on the side of people with evil intentions.
Yeah, I think they're on their way out, quite honestly. You know what? I'm tired of it. I don't know about you, and I'm pretty sure I'm sick of it. I'm so tired of the control factor and the manipulation and the negativity and the spiking up and the polarity consciousness and not stepping up to the galactic neighborhood. I'm just burned out on it. So I think it's time for them to just bag it and say, that's it, game over.
Right. And I agree. And I think you see a younger generation that's much more tolerant and open and, tired of it as well. Absolutely.
It doesn't work anymore. It just doesn't work. It's going in reverse.
And I think we're going to see an end to it. I really do. I mean, like I'm saying, this is their kind of last hurrah. We've had a kind of a huge invasion of privacy. Everything's being monitored. There's a huge squeeze on money. There's a sort of a real kind of almost desperate, panicky behavior on the side of, who's controlling the wealth.
Right.
And, if they're that afraid, because, there's no need to have that amount of wealth held by that small portion of people. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
And it's not useful to anyone at all. I mean, it's
a space monopoly. In my opinion, I think all of that money is really going to these exotic technologies that have been controlling society for decades. What else would they be doing with their money? I mean, really.
Which is why the ETs are like, nope, that ain't going to happen.
I don't know if you saw Elysium or not, but it's that same concept of a certain class of people or a certain percentage of people wanting to traverse the galactic highways by themselves without everyone else. And then that, in my opinion, I think that's where they're heading with their version of artificial intelligence. But I think it's going to flatline because it doesn't work that way in the cosmos, even if they wanted to.
No, I mean, there was a whole near-death movement, the near-death books of the 80s and 90s, Betty Eady and Daniel Brinkley and all these guys. That changed people's consciousness. And that was something that was manipulated from the other side by enlightened masters, so to speak. It was, humanity's consciousness was lifted up, and we're getting made more and more aware of how truly connected we are. And that's part of what's going on with UFOs and the whole spiritual awakening and the light working and all the huge amount of psychic stuff people are having right now.
Right. And to me, that's the norm. Had we not had such a distorted environment, I think we would have accelerated further than people could possibly imagine. But, we're dealing with a world that's been in limitation by, like I said, the social engineering and all those, those people's corporations that were trying to control everyone, which is really a shame. But it is breaking down. I see it breaking down. I think it's imploding. I don't think there's any place else for it to go. It can't go up, so it has to implode, and we're not hanging out with it. So,
right. Well, and people are talking about, important, Senators, Bernie Sanders, Paul Hellyer, talking about the banking industry. Senator Sanders as well. They're laying it out. We know now what crooks you guys really are.
Yeah, it's time to let go of all that. And that's another thing too with the free energy, the 0 point. We could go into that corridor of just using the 0 point free energy versus all the fracking. I was just touching on this also, fracking and things that are literally detrimental to the environment. I mean, from the money to the greed, it's always about greed and money, but it takes on the formula of our natural resources too, which, we don't need to live like this anymore.
Yeah,
but people don't know any better. So
yeah, I'm very curious how else is going to roll out, because I'm thinking, it doesn't have to be super, horrific.
No, it doesn't.
There's no reason to suffer. All of this can go quite smoothly through us. That's what I think we're seeing. It's a very controlled process of disclosure. No, there's not a super official landing by UFOs, but they're doing it more and more a little bit. And it's same with disclosure. We're seeing a lot of high-level officials. We've had, Mayor Fife Symington. We've had senators talking about UFOs. People very high levels of government and science and, astronomers, the whole deal. We're at a point now where it's edging towards full-on, they're here.
Yeah, I think they have to. But you know why? Because there's been a lot of disclosure with the UFO communities and people who have been out there communicating the data, whether it's covert technology or anything else. So I think they're forced to right now. I think they have no choice because the truth media has been running, we've been just like path cutting to get this rolling. And I think that's part of it, because it's going to make them look stupid if they don't start disclosing,
Right. It's like the civil rights movement. I mean, some things are just their time. You're not going to stop it. The universe has decided, this is the way it is.
Yeah, it's unstoppable energy. There's no doubt about that, which is interesting. We do live in interesting times, I guess. That's the truth of it, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, aliens, gosh. I mean, some people have a real problem with it. And I kind of get it. It's a core belief. It really affects your idea of yourself in the universe. It's like religion. It's like those major politics, these really close kind of core beliefs we have about ourselves and who we are, and our pet, because we're not highest on the pecking order, and where did we truly come from? Here's something that bothers me. Some of these ETs look just like us. I mean, seriously, they are humans.
Well, we're not human, and we're one of them. I believe we are descendants of the star people. So yeah, we are them and they are us. Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's the proof right there. You cannot reasonably say that we evolved on Earth if there are aliens that look just like us who are coming from other planets.
That's right. There you go. And I think that once again, it's the social engineering and the belief system that has held everybody back in limitation, because they don't want to think outside the box. They don't want to think of the possibility that could be a truth, a universal truth, which I think is very sad, but that's how they've been raised and programmed.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a tough truth. I was like pretty shook up. I mean, I only not too long ago found out that there was some really strong evidence that giant people lived on our planet.
The giants is a really big deal. If you talk to Jason Gerald, I've interviewed him, and he's done some phenomenal work with some of the Adena and some other things.
Yeah, I'm like, holy cow. I'm like, okay. Looking into that, it was pretty hard to adjust to. But
well, think about it. It's a big multiverse, and there are so many species on and off planet. And then think about all the supernatural stuff that goes on with all these different types of beings and life forms. I mean, it's unlimited.
Yeah, I mean, the world's absolutely, I think, a lot stranger. We don't know as much as we think we might know. We're getting there, but I mean, like, take the Bigfoot phenomenon. There are skeptics out there who don't know that Bigfoot is real. And they don't understand that there are vast areas of wilderness out there which we haven't really truly explored. We haven't. And the evidence for Bigfoot is outstanding. I mean, it's absolutely overwhelming. It's mountainous. There's no doubt that there is something out there in terms of a large primate.
What is your take on Bigfoot? Do you think it's something interdimensional, or what do you think it is?
There is an aspect to it that's absolutely, and it's very hard to pin down for me. I'm not what I call a Bigfoot expert. I've written, quite a bit about it, and I've interviewed a number of people, but I'm not like one of those guys who's a true on Bigfooter. But yeah, at least a couple of these cases have paranormal aspects that are truly baffling and involve Bigfoot that can speak, that are intelligent, that can disappear, that are interdimensional. What do you call it? Shape-shifting even? Type of thing. And I'm like, oh. But then you have most cases that I feel are not quite like that. They're just people seeing what looks like a large primate that's actually living out there and is eating and sleeping in nests and so on. And perhaps they do have the ability to slip in and out of dimensions. But what I'm seeing is a small portion of cases with UFOs that involve Bigfoot, which is really hard to pin down, and small cases of Bigfoot with UFOs, and a weird bleed through on paranormal phenomena. That's like kind of like, all right. I mean, like Bigfoot I've got a number of cases in which the witnesses felt that they had telepathy with the Bigfoot. So
yeah,
I'm not going to ignore that. I'm not going to ignore that.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And what your take is on Mothman? I just interviewed Susan Shepard about Mothman. That's fascinating to me, that case too.
Yeah, what's neat about that is it's unique, or largely, but if you look very deeply into all the accounts, it's not 100% unique. I mean, I found a number of cases in New Mexico when I wrote, UFOs over New Mexico involving an owl man. And where witnesses saw this thing flying around, a la Mothman. I mean, the same type of thing.
Wow. Yeah.
And the Mothman's no doubt real. I mean, it's a huge thing. It's still a part of that community. It's affected them so deeply.
Interesting.
I don't know it's not your typical UFO story, but it's, I'm thinking maybe it's more interdimensional, or this is something else we're dealing with here, but.
Or supernatural, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, because they've got a number of UFO sightings there as well. But most of the Mothman, as I recall, were just him flying around scaring the daylights out of people.
Right. Have you ever had any record of people with MIB sightings in association with their UFO sightings that have approached them?
I personally haven't. Really at all. I've read about it quite a bit in other cases. I know, that this has happened to people. I did have a witness who had her hypnosis tapes stolen. I had another witness who had a major encounter, wrote it down, put it on his mantelpiece in an envelope, and it was gone the next day. He called the police, and they're like, well, there's nothing we can do, that's all they took. And he's like, well, yeah, but someone stole this. And so, I mean, what's going on here? So, I mean, in that regard, yeah. I mean, I had one threatening phone call myself. I was researching the Topanga Canyon UFO wave, 1992, 1994. Huge wave. I wrote a book about it. Cars being chased down the street, being pulled up into the sky, landings, abductions, the whole deal. And I got this call from this guy who was, really threatening, actually. I can't say it scared me, because for some reason, I'm just gung-ho about the subject, and with the out-of-body experiences, that makes you a little fearless. I don't know, but he was threatening me. He's like, yeah, I've got top secret clearance, and I've worked in Vietnam, and I've done satellite mapping, and you're Preston Dennett, right? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, you're looking into UFOs, huh? And I'm like, yeah. And he says, well, and I remember this vividly. He's like, what you're doing is dangerous. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're looking into. You're barking up the wrong tree. What you're doing, is dangerous. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm like kind of waiting for him to elaborate, and he kind of changed tactics. He's like, besides, there's no pay dirt in it anyway. And I'm thinking to myself, well, hold on a second. Either it's dangerous or there's no pay dirt in it. Right? Can't be both.
So
wow. and he kind of went on along on that vein for a little bit, and finally, like, have you got anything else to say? Because thanks for the call.
Weird.
Yeah, not an overt threat. I'm gonna cut you.
Right.
But I've had phone problems. I've had mail. All my mail came out. This is before the days of email.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention my email problems, by the way. But boy, I had mail problems. I really did. I would open my mailbox and all my UFO mail came back opened.
Really? Oh, wow. Very interesting.
Yeah, I'm like, hey, I'd bring my sister home sometimes for lunch. We worked at the same office, and I lived nearby. And I'm like, you open my mailbox and you tell me what you find, what you think, because this kept happening. She opened it up and she's like, well, that looks like your mail's been opened. I'm like, yeah, it does. That sure does, doesn't it? Yeah.
Wow. Did you ever mention it to the postmaster?
No, I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm like, you know what? Look at it. Go ahead. I'm going to talk about it. What do you want to see? Come on over.
Right. Well, they're so nosy. And nowadays, the internet, it's so easy for, spy agencies to just sit there and read everything anyway as a third party. So, yeah.
Right. And the ETs, for that matter. I have no doubt that, this is their technology. They've got to be like spying on our computers.
Well, it's funny. Well, I think that's why they learned from us, basically. I'm talking about the governments and the covert intel, but that's one of the things they learned from us because they're data mining our information and research, which I'm like, oh, really? Well, why don't you cut us a check then? Because you're getting free information. When you think about it. Think about all your hard work and information that's been literally sent to a third party without your, without you signing off on it. And they're probably using that data for whatever research or whatever they're doing in the black science departments. So that's the way I see it anyway.
Yeah, there's so much going on behind the scenes. We're seeing just the tip of the iceberg, and it would be disheartening, to say the least, if everyone saw what was really going on. But if they saw everything, I think ultimately they would be very hopeful and optimistic. Because that's the way I see it. These multiple layers of forces, the enlightened masters, the ETs, kind of at the top of the food ladder there, the food chain, and below that, these 1%ers think they're in control. They're not. The public has a much greater control than they realize. They're one of the major forces, and there's just this kind of, I don't know, this energy, this divine energy, this time has come sort of aspect to things. Whether it's the planet itself, Gaia, or what's going on here, I'm not precisely sure, but there does seem to feel like there's an event coming that's drawing a lot of interest from a lot of different circles.
Right. Yeah, I think we're at critical mass. I think that's the bottom line. I think the Earth has had enough. I think it's just time for the bigger shifts to happen. And hopefully that will be very smooth progression. And one thing you mentioned before we hit the break before, which I thought was really interesting, you started to say you were talking about we are projecting down to Earth. And I like that. I like the way you mentioned that. And can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah. There's a sense when you're having an out-of-body experience, it's like, oh, this is kind of scary, because I'm leaving my body. I'm like, well, let me tell you the truth of what's actually happening here. You left your body long ago. You live on the astral planes. That's your true home. It really, really is. And will never be apparent until you start having out-of-body experiences and you realize, like, oh my God, this is where I really come from. The other side is more vivid. It's more real. The colors are deeper. They're more vibrant. Everything is made of light. Your body is far superior in almost every way. You can certainly fly, you can teleport, you can do telepathy, telekinesis, all these kind of crazy things that we think is almost magic really aren't. And what we're doing is we're projecting down to Earth I'm not precisely sure why, but there's various theories. I've certainly read a bit about this and had my own take on it, but as far as I can tell, it's to experience, emotions in this kind of raw state, to experience individuality, to experience amnesia, and go through this kind of Earth school where we learn compassion and things like this. And Robert Monroe talked about this. He's like, people who go through Earth School are really highly respected, in some of these other places I've been to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yeah, I can totally believe that. Because,
yeah, really.
It's a little rough down here. We have no memories, and that's really hard. We have to really struggle just to wake up to our true selves.
And then when you do wake up, you get attacked,
right.
At least I did. So, I mean, once you start empowering yourself, it seems like they're really after you as gatekeepers. So that's very interesting.
It's always a kind of a good sign. I mean, I hate to say it, but it's a good sign when you're getting attacked because you struck a nerve.
Right.
You've done something, and like people, there's people who are working for the other, with evil intentions, I guess. Mm-hmm. And when they see something like that, and they're like, "Hey," they try and stop because they know it's having a huge effect. Mm-hmm. So that's what I mean by it's a good sign because they recognize something that's going to affect a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Can I ask you what your take is on the moon? What your impression is?
God, the moon. Oh, yes, sure. I didn't look into it until I talked to this guy. I'd interviewed him because he was a UFO witness. He's like, I was a photographer in the Navy. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, they bumped me up to a top secret clearance. And next thing I know, I'm on the ship that's picking up the astronauts. They dropped me down right next to them. I was in quarantine. I took photographs. They were out of their minds. He said the astronauts were like crazy coming back from the moon and told him they saw all kinds of UFOs. They saw crashed saucers. They saw alien bases. They saw what looked like structures on the moon. He's like, oh my God, really? And they're like, yeah. And it was his job to take their photographs and develop them. He said that there was, I don't know how many, 100 million, a lot of photographs. There wasn't a chance that he was going to develop the lion's share of them. He developed, a very tiny portion and saw some of this stuff. He saw these canals. He saw what looked like plants. Saw what looked like, atmosphere. They told him, yes, there's certain places where there's atmosphere on the moon. And all kinds of crazy stuff. And so he's telling me this, and I'm like, oh, well, all right, and I interviewed him pretty extensively on it, and then I looked into it. I looked into Fred Steckling. Didn't know about Fred Steckling, and we found alien bases on the moon, or George Leonard, someone else is on the moon, and for that matter, a lot of people has looked into it. And yeah, I'm pretty sure NASA means never a straight answer, and they're withholding information about what they found on our moon.
Right. And when he mentions those, the astronauts were kind of crazy. Which Apollo mission was that then?
He gave me the years. As I recall, it was like 69 to 70.
That's interesting. I'm just curious, so I'm wondering if they went through some kind of an erasure with the astronauts. I know that, it seems like they've been through mind control, a lot of them, some of them anyway. So I was curious if there was an erasure done with people, if they were that crazy, scattered after what they were observing or witnessing, if they went through some kind of a mind control re-entrainment program. That's just me asking. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I looked into it. I looked into the stories from conspiracy theorists, the official story, and what this guy told me. And he said they were pretty upset. Not only because they saw this stuff, but because they weren't informed. They weren't warned. They weren't told that this was going to happen. And what it basically amounted to is they were not even part of the real space program. And they were sort of this whitewash. They were the publicity front. And this was pretty upsetting for them. And it messed with their heads. And they all kind of came away from these experiences, profoundly changed. Spiritually, certainly. I mean, if you read some of their memoirs, you'll see that they had some they felt pretty spiritual about all the things that happened.
Right. So a lot of people who speculate that we never went to the moon. What's your impression? You obviously think we did go. So
no doubt we did. No doubt. way too many people worked on it. We tracked these things go to the moon, according to Chris Kraft, according to Maurice Chatelain, according to a number of other insiders. We were followed to and from the moon. This is exactly what the guy I interviewed said.
Mm-hmm.
And this was common knowledge in NASA. And there's no doubt we went to and from the moon. A lot of people saw this occur. There was ham radio operators following this. There's radio telecasts.
Mm-hmm.
I think what happened, though, and why we've got a conspiracy saying, no, it never happened, was a lot of the footage we took, we're not going to show people. We're not showing it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the rocks we took, they're never going to see the public, and they haven't.
Right.
And this has been a problem. Release the moon rocks. They still haven't released most of them. And they never will, because they're not rocks. They're pieces of alien hardware, and they're not going to show the footage either, which, by the way, they mysteriously lost. I don't know if you remember that. They lost the moon footage. Really?
Really? How does that happen?
I don't believe that for a second.
Mm-hmm.
And they faked some of it. I'm thinking this is something we saw in the James Bond movies. James Bond is running from one of the spies, and he runs through a set, and I think it was Utah or something, Arizona.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. That wasn't. Oh gosh, what movie was that? I know what you're talking about, though.
Yeah, one of these James Bond movies, and
was it?
Yeah, I'm almost positive. In one of these spy books from Ian Fleming, made into a movie, James Bond, and he walks through this set where they're faking the moon landing.
Oh, right, yeah,
right.
Okay.
And I think that they may have done this. I think they may have faked certain segments because they're like, well, we need to give him something. We need to give him something.
Right.
We've got nothing from, Apollo, pick 11, 12, whatever. And we need to give him something. And let's do this because we're not showing them this alien base. That's all we got.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So it did happen, but they actually created certain fake segments in order to give something to the mass collective.
Right. And we got enough insider accounts. I mean, Larry Warren from left of Eastgate, part of the Rendlesham from Forest incident, wrote about how he was taken with a group of soldiers and shown structures on the moon in a video from the Army. Also, Stephen Greer's book, Disclosure, talks about a lady who worked for NASA and came upon someone airbrushing UFOs out.
Right, I remember that, yeah.
Gary McKinnon, the hacker from England, uncovered NASA basically, talking about UFOs. Busted, we got you. So, yeah, we know for sure that there's something up there.
Right. When you say that they were, that it was a front insofar as that particular group of astronauts, so what was really going on? Do you have any idea what was happening behind the scenes? And why they even used the astronauts as even a sideshow?
I can only speculate. I've certainly looked into things like, what was that thing? Alternative 2, Alternative 5, something like that. And these where we went to Mars, supposedly, and there's bases on the moon. And I think what we're looking at is a situation that was just. They wanted to keep secret, and they wanted to. It was apparent that we were exploring space because we were trending towards that, and yet what we had found was so momentous, and we were so much farther along than anyone realized that there was this sort of fake front that was fed to the public. Like, this is really how far along we've advanced, when that wasn't true at all. No, we were much farther along. We've advanced much farther along. I mean, the technology we're seeing is actually quite old, and that's pretty well accepted among researchers into this sort of thing. And I talked to a guy at my work. I work as a bookkeeper. He was in the Army, and he's like, boy, man, I went into one of these tanks. You wouldn't believe, I can't tell you, they swore me to secrecy, but I can tell you that the stuff they have in there is way beyond anything I've ever seen out here in terms of technology. So sensory equipment and, flat screen TVs and touch screens and holographics and, biofeedback and operating with your mind and all these kinds of things are real technology. Healing technology. We have
Right.
healing technology.
And where did he see that?
This was just in the Army.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, because they use an awful lot of that in the Black Science Department when they abduct people. So very interesting. Wow. That's a lot of data. My goodness. Yeah. And we're almost out of time here. We have about 4 or 5 minutes, plus or minus. But is there anything you wanted to cover? Because I know I've been kind of asking a lot of different questions, but is there anything in particular you wanted to address before we wind down the show?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. This is a subject I take very seriously in terms of UFOs and out of body exploring the whole paranormal field. I know we jumped around quite a bit.
It's been great, though. I hope to have you back. It's been fun.
Yeah, I mean, the out of body stuff I absolutely adore. I love it. I really recommend people try it. We didn't get into how to do it.
Right. So I'll have to have you back if you're up for that. Let me know. I would love to talk deeper into that level or onto that level if you're interested.
You got it. But that's very important to me. And this whole UFO subject, again, I take very seriously. I think it could solve the economic crisis, the energy crisis, the environmental crisis. One fell swoop. There's going to be disclosure. We're going to have open official contact. I think we're trending towards that. UFOs are not going away. I don't think there's something to be afraid of. I think it's a mostly positive force. I think we're being uplifted into a new age. We might have some rough times, but I'm pretty hopeful on the outcome.
I am too. I think that if you stay tuned to the higher frequencies, we'll be riding the right waves. There's no doubt about it. And I do want to encourage everybody to purchase your books now. Do you have a coverage on all states or just a few states when it comes to UFOs over particular states? I know what Colorado you've got covered and a couple other states. How many states have you gotten
right. To? It's like 6 or 7. It's mostly the Southwest.
Okay.
And New York. My latest book is Undersea UFO Base, about sightings off the coast here and a possible base, or Inside UFOs, which is 10 very close encounters, the more extensive type cases. And also a series of books I'm putting out called Not From Here, which are about the outliers, the cases that don't fit the typical mold, that really have something kind of strange to say about how bizarre and unusual and the depth and complexity of this phenomenon.
Yeah, I like that. I like the title too. Not From Here. That makes so much sense. Yeah, it's going to be good. Are you doing any presentations anywhere anytime soon?
No, I'm mostly doing radio shows, publicizing my latest books, and working on my next one, which is kind of a reissue or actually a brand new book, mostly about UFO healing cases.
I like that.
So very nice. I think that's a pretty important subject, and I've gotten a lot of interest in it. So I'm very eager to put that one out for sure. I've got Solaris. I have 200 cases.
Really?
200, probably closer to 300.
That's beautiful. So that is some kind of beings that show up and actually heal these people?
Absolutely. Physically heal them. I mean, you name an illness, I bet you I've got a case of it, whether it's, hemorrhoids or earache or fever or cancer or diphtheria, diabetes, cuts, wounds, colds, kidney stones, liver disease. I could go on.
That's fascinating. Well, I'm a firm believer in that. I know we're capable of healing through holistic healing anyway, so it doesn't surprise me at all. That sounds fascinating. I can't wait for that one to go live. When's that going to be live? Any idea?
We're probably looking at next year, early next year.
Cool. I'm looking forward to that one then. I don't have to be reading that. Well, I have to tell you, it's been a pleasure to interview you tonight. It's been awesome. I've been wanting to get you on my show for a while here. So I want to thank you again. And once again, let everybody know how to reach out to you and get in touch with you. And if they're a contactee or if they had a sighting, how do they reach you? How do they contact you?
Yeah, thanks, Solaris. Appreciate that. My website would be probably the best way. Just go to prestondennett.weebly.com. If you just punch in my name, it should take you there. All my books are there, excerpts. You can buy them through there, through Amazon. You can also contact me through my website. I'd love to hear from people, whether you've got a comment, a story to share, or a question, whatever. I mean, I love connecting to people on this subject. And thanks, Solaris. I love going on these shows, and you were great. Loved it.
Thank you. No, it was a pleasure to interview you tonight. I had a great time with you. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in and listening, and make sure that you get on that website for Preston and check him out. It's been fantastic. How often do you do your blogs?
Not as much as I'd like.
Okay, well, get those busy because those are interesting as well. And everybody, we're out of time here. Thank you again, Preston. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. Stay tuned for Shiny Side Out with Dave, and Mecky. So sailing on into the night down under with their awesome show, as they always do. Not sure what they're talking about, but it'll be a fascinating show. All right, everybody, thank you very much. And Preston, thank you so much, and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. Revolution Radio.
You don't see it, do you? How close we are to absolute chaos? The sick ones are sitting on their fat masses, eating and drink themselves into a stupor, polluting the world without a second thought while it goes down the toilet. Nobody wants to do the nasty work. You know, the shit that we all just think about. Most good citizens are just along for the ride and then bitch and moan and complain about everything when it doesn't work out. Not me. Get it done.
Revolution Radio, where we do the nasty work. www.freedomslips.com.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it.
Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates.